welcome to This Week in Health IT, where we discuss the news, information, and emerging thought with leaders from across the healthcare industry. This is episode number 26. We are officially halfway through the year. It's Friday, July 6th. Today we look at the startup landscape and social media support in fighting the opioid epidemic. Say that 10 times fast. This podcast is brought to you by Health Lyrics. Are your strategies constrained by infrastructure or are you tied in a knot of applications? We've been in your shoes. We've been moving health systems to the cloud since 2010. Find out how to leverage the cloud to new levels of efficiency and productivity. Visit healthlyrics.com to schedule your free consult. My name is Bill Russell. We're covering healthcare CIO, writer, consultant, and with the previously mentioned Health Lyrics. Before I get to our guest, an update on our listener drive. We've exceeded 200 combined new subscribers to our YouTube channel and podcast outlets, which means we've raised $2,000 for Hope Builders, which provides disadvantaged youth the life skills and job training they need to achieve enduring personal and professional success. I've hired their graduates. Their stories are amazing. You just have to love giving these kids an opportunity for a second chance. We have 6 more weeks where our sponsor will give $1,000 for every additional 100 subscribers. 2 wins for the price of 1. Listen to great content from industry leaders like our guest today and give back to the community while you do it. Join us today by subscribing, tell your friends, and just follow us. We're posting a new video out on YouTube every single day. So today's guest is the CEO and co-founder of WellPepper, a clinically validated and award-winning platform for digital patient treatment plans. She co-founded WellPepper in the late 2012 to address issues in communication and continuity of care after a personal experience when her mother was released from 6 months in the hospital with no instructions and a month until the next follow-up visit. Prior to WellPepper, she was VP of Marketing at IQ Metrics and Director of Product Management at Microsoft Corporation. Today, Ann Weiler joins us. And welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Did I mispronounce your name?
You did. It's Weiler.
Weiler. There you go. And actually, even in the show notes, I spelled your name wrong. So
I know.
There we go.
We're off to a great start.
Yes.
We've actually known each other for a couple of years, you know.
I know, but we don't. I don't know. We don't spell each other's names. It's Ann with an E for those of you who are following along at home. I don't know how I keep getting that wrong. I had it wrong on the website until this morning, so I apologize for that. So you left a well-paying job.
I did.
With a strong organization to found a digital startup
in health.
Out of really a personal experience. So tell us a little bit about WellPepper and your journey. Now I'm saying WellPepper correctly, right?
Yes, that is correct. It is WellPepper.
There we go.
So we have a platform for patient-facing care plans. So if you think about the way care plans have evolved, for the most part, they've been in the EMR. What we have is what needs to be delivered to the patient. And we take the approach that patients can and will self-manage if you give them the right tools. So a lot of what the patients are getting today are not instructions or even information delivered in a way that they can do anything about it. And so we've really seen a shift over the years that we've been doing this, from providers saying it doesn't matter what I tell them, they won't do it, to providers understanding that if you give them something that is actionable, manageable, and really broken down and based on research. And that's not just clinical research that we're doing, but it's also research of how people are interacting with our care plans, that you can learn from that and you can get something that a patient can follow, can adhere to, and even improve their outcomes.
So are you leveraging other people's research, or are you doing some original research as well?
Well, we've been very fortunate. We have a couple research partners, one at Boston University Center for Neuro Rehab and one at Harvard. And they've done randomized controlled trials. So we've been very fortunate in that we've just been able to partner with them. They use the technology to deliver their interventions outside the clinic, and then they test the outcomes on that. And then we also, as we're collecting patient data, so I think one of the most interesting things is this is a channel for new data, and it's data that's patient generated, what patients are doing against their care plans. We're starting to analyze that. So we know things like, if you want someone to be adherent to a care plan, 5 to 8 tasks is the optimal number. We also know that 70% of the messages that patients send in a system like this don't need a response. and 2% of them are urgent. And those are the ones that you want to get back to the providers, which goes back to our philosophy of this isn't about managing a patient. This is about enabling and empowering a patient and then connecting them to help when they need it.
Yeah, well, you're very, one of the things that I think that's been the foundation for our relationship over the years has been, you're very pragmatic. So, I mean, can you give us some stories or some examples of outcomes from your technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So the randomized control studies that I talked about, the one was done with people with Parkinson's disease, and the people who had the digital intervention versus the control group who basically had paper, usual care condition. The digital intervention saw a 9% improvement in mobility versus a 12% decline in the control group, and that was over a year. So that's a real physical improvement. We did a falls prevention study with Harvard. Because this is being recorded, I can't tell you the actual details, but Dr. Jonathan Bean, who's a physiatrist, was the principal investigator on that, and he has clinically meaningful outcomes that were maintained at 1 year, and they're really good. These are preventing people, seniors 65 to 85, actually 95, from having falls. But we've also found things within our own data. So from patients reporting their side effects after surgery, we were able to identify people who are at 3 times greater risk of readmissions. So I think that's like, it's a combination of course you have to do validated independent research, but you also have to look at, as this data is coming in, what kinds of things can you find in this data? And preventing readmissions is of course, I think a top goal of any type of system like this. Right.
So one of the things we like to do is ask our guests, what's one thing they're working on that they're excited about? Maybe we just covered it, but what is it?
Yeah, definitely. So there are 2 things I'm going to say. One is that we're applying machine learning to the data that we're collecting. I am laughing because there's a dog here who is telling me that he needs water. And he's doing that by putting his paw in his water dish and dragging it around. So I'm gonna pause. This is gonna be the edit part. Can we do that?
I will pause. You can give the dog water. So there you go. That's recording live with a digital health startup. That's just what happens. The dog came in the room and you have to give the dog water. So please continue.
Yeah, we have many stories about this dog interrupting conference calls and things. Okay, so we're applying machine learning to all of the data that we're collecting and using that to help scale the clinicians. So we have a machine learned message classifier that looks for adverse events in patient messages, and that's used in surgical scenarios. So if someone messages something that it's been trained to say, oh, this might be something that's urgent, we'll alert the care team. And we did that by starting off by analyzing all the data that's coming in. So the approach that we take is we get a channel of communication flowing of whether that's structured or unstructured data of patients interacting with their care plan, and then we start to analyze it so that we can learn things, so that we can suggest things to the clinician and make their lives easier. Again, coming back to, most patients don't need this active monitoring, they just need help if something's going wrong. So that's one thing we're very excited about. And then the other is the marketplace that we announced for care plans. So this is for health systems to be able to share their best practices and have other health systems use them. And our launch partner for that's Mayo Clinic. So what happens is, as we implement Mayo Clinic's patient-facing care plans on our platform, we can make those available for others to use. And that's another place where the data starts to become very interesting, because it's not just the data of Mayo Clinic's patients using these care plans, it's the data of other health systems using them. And we'll also make available these protocols, like the ones from Boston University and Harvard, that were used in these randomized control trials. So if you think about it, it's an ability to scale patient-facing best practices and collect data on them to see what's working and what's not working.
That's exciting. So you've been at this since 2012, so 6 years.
Well, not really. See, for some unknown reason, we incorporated at the last week of 2012, and I have no idea why we did that. We have since changed lawyers. I think he must have had like some quota or something. It made no sense. It meant we had to file taxes for a year where we had no business whatsoever, and just made things confusing. So really 5 years.
5 years. There you go. All right. Well, that's really exciting. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to transition to the show. We'll do in the news, then we'll do some sound bites. I'll ask you some questions, and then we'll do a social media close. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll start with my story, which is, I figured having someone like yourself on, we could talk about this whole startup scene. So Startup Health just released their mid-year report. Funding topped $6 billion across 414 deals. And then we're at the halfway point of the year. So July marks the end of another record mid-year report in digital health, more than $6 billion raised in the first 2 quarters of 2018, 414 deals. That's the largest mid-year deal count to date, and 60 deals more than we reported last year at this time. This increase in deal count is partially due to the rise in new international hubs of health innovation, particularly across China, which dominates the global market with over $500 million US invested. As the market expands globally, we're seeing every section of the market receiving funding, from insurance to biometric data acquisition. Okay, so they released this report. They do it every, I think every 6 months they actually release a report. I could be wrong. Maybe they do it quarterly. And so they have some interesting charts on here. So in 2010, there was a 1.2 billion in funded deals. Halfway through this year, we're at 6.1 billion and 400 some odd. Does the appetite to fund digital health startups surprise you at all? And do you think it's going to continue at this pace?
I don't think it's going to continue at this pace, but I'm always a little bit of a pessimist. I will say that I've been very happy to see this increase in funding, because when we started, I talked to some prominent VCs in Seattle who said, I don't think anyone's funding digital health. And I was like, I'm seeing something different, but it's great to see both Rock Health and Startup Health coming out with these reports. But I do think you have to look deeply at what's being counted. I think if you remember last year, one of the biggest deals was Outcome Health. And yes, they were digital health, but they were really pharma advertising. And then turns out that, maybe they weren't even doing that right. But if you look at the Startup Health, like Point Click Care is an EMR that focuses on skilled nursing and long-term care facilities. So is that digital health? I guess so, but that's not a new company. So if you look at the 10 largest deals, you kind of have to say, okay, which ones are really falling into this category and which aren't? And I would say, Point Click Care may not fall into that category. Oscar certainly does, but they are a payer. So it's just something to think about, of like what is making up this category. I think China is interesting, and certainly, we're seeing two things. I think I was looking this up. I think it was Baidu who just dropped their digital health team. So there's like a whole bunch of weird things happening. Lots of funding, and then Qualcomm is getting rid of their digital health. GE's getting rid of their digital health. So I don't know. There's a lot of flux going on, and that's why I sort of feel like that could be the beginning of maybe we're looking more at outcomes and revenue than funding as a metric. Yeah.
Well, that would be an interesting metric. You also had the layoffs at IBM around their AI. So, so we see pullback in some areas. We see moving forward, the 10 deals that you were discussing, Oscar, Livongo's on here, Iora Health, some of the others. But listen to the functions. I mean, I just find this interesting. So you have biometric data acquisition, clinical workflow, insurance, admin workflow, research, pop health, education content, patient empowerment. It really, usually when I look at these lists, I go, okay, I see we're starting to coalesce around a certain area, whatever it is, patient engagement. I'm not seeing that. We're not coalescing around any one thing. There just seems to be, we're still at this point where it's scattered. Let's scatter a bunch of money. Let's see what happens. And then we'll put more money into it later after we see which one sort of gets traction. I mean, it's not really a question. It's more of an observation of, is the money going to eventually tell us who the winners and losers are going to be? Because it doesn't seem to be yet.
I don't think the money ever tells you that. I mean, if you look at just typical VC firms, right, only 28% of their investments make return. So that's telling you that 70% basically are not. So if if you're looking at that, that's probably one or two or three that are big, and they're probably not in the same categories. But I think that the funding is reflecting what's happening in the market too, because all of these new mergers, like I was thinking about this, well, I'm jumping ahead, but in your question that you gave me in advance, I won't tell you the answer to it right now, but like you think about all these new companies, like what kind of technology do they need? Are they going to build it all themselves? Like the JP Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, the CVS, Aetna, like these are different types of companies. And what kind of technologies do they need? And maybe that's why the technology investment's all over the map too. Like we don't know what the new healthcare organizations are going to be. Certainly we're seeing, the payer provider coming together, but then you're seeing payer and pharma, or retail, I guess, if you look at CVS. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, and maybe that's where we are. Someone told me at the HIMSS Venture event this year that this year is the year of security. And the winner was someone that did basically device security for old devices that could be security risks. So, which is interesting because I'm not seeing that in the funding, but maybe security companies don't need the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's interesting that they're not in that list, because I'm hearing the same thing out in the market. Is just the amount of money healthcare is driving towards security is going up, and this device security has been overlooked for decades, and now it needs to be addressed. A lot of that is because biometric devices don't fall under traditional IT; they fall under clinical, and clinical. Yep. Didn't have a sort of a digital mindset around it. And so, so let's talk about the international metro hubs. So they have this chart, and London has more deals this year, India, China, a ton more deals, Toronto, Israel, you have all these international hubs. And obviously that's going to spark, more innovation and whatnot. But talk to me, I want to just get more down at the nitty gritty. So are you focusing more on the US market, or are you being pulled in other markets? And if you do get pulled in other markets, what kind of criteria do you look at to say, well, that's going to be too much development. That's going to be too much whatever to do that.
We get inbound from other markets all the time. And sometimes we get pulled there from partners. We are mostly focused on the US. Our data's in the US, and our product is currently only available in English, but it is set up to be localized. So it's very easy to localize. And so the criteria we look at is questions around data location, and whether it's a showstopper that the data is located in the US, and if it is, then we may just move on from that. Or if it is a showstopper, but they're willing to pay for a dedicated instance in another country, that's totally fine. But it's always this sort of trade-off between no, the data has to be in my country, but I'm not willing to pay for a dedicated instance. Then it becomes cost prohibitive. So that's a question that we look at. We also look at, really how real do we think this is, and how quickly do we think it could move? Because there's this, I'm actually Canadian. I don't know if I should say that, but I am, especially the day after, or 2 days after Independence Day. And, of course, I would love to have our product deployed in Canada. And you would think that a product that is going to help people self-manage and lower costs would be extremely well received there, because it is a capitated model. But they're actually possibly slower moving than the US. And I think it's because the systems are so much larger. And then so we're constantly in back and forth in this, where's your data? Questions like that. Now, the nice thing is we're on Amazon Web Services, and they now have servers in Canada, so we could put a dedicated instance there. But those are things that we think of. So we're not against other geographies, but as a small company, you do have to focus. And if you can't have someone on the ground in that country or a partner who's basically completely representing you, it's pretty hard to do that. Plus, there's still so much opportunity in the US.
Right. Well, obviously, that makes a lot of sense. The thing which you said, which sort of struck me, is, you can localize pretty easily, but haven't you been pulled in the Southern California market? Obviously, we have many languages.
Yep.
And I mean, haven't you had to spin it up for multiple languages just to serve the U.S. market?
Not yet, but we can do two things. So when I talk about localized, there's the Chrome of the app, like the buttons, the OK button and the
Right.
cancel button. The content can come from anywhere. So the content, we do have content that's in other languages. So if it's a video explanation or text content, so think of the application is we have the building blocks that deliver the various activities to a patient. The Chrome on that is in English, but the content within it, the specific instructions could be in any language. Well, except for the multi-byte character right to left. But anyway, I just
but the video,
sorry, as I said that, I hear
obviously could be in any language that you want.
I hear the engineering team going, no, not any language. Some languages take up more space. So we can deliver content, like educational content and instructions to patients in any language. It's just like the Chrome of the app is currently in English. But it's a simple search and replace on strings. So it's ready. Like my co-founder and I both came from Microsoft, so we knew we had to build a localizable product from day one.
So, I mean, the takeaway from this is it's great that there's a lot of money going into this space, funding innovation and whatnot. We probably need to look at if there is another metric to see, what the outcomes of each one of these products. That would be, I'll start looking for that metric. I mean, have you seen something out there that people are measuring?
I mean, I know Evidation Health is trying to do that. They're trying to say these are products that actually proven to work, but I don't know that there's an industry metric. A lot of it's like coming. We were pretty early in actually partnering to do a randomized control trial, and I think you're starting to see more of that. And for us, we didn't drive that. That was actually, we were fortunate to meet researchers at BU who wanted to do digital interventions, and so that just happened that they ended up using our product and testing our product. So I think that's another question I've seen is like who's actually doing the validation of it. And granted, you do have to trust like some of the data that we're collecting, but I wouldn't, it's funny because when we talk about the data that we're collecting and the outcomes we're seeing from that, people have asked me, well, how come you haven't published on this? And I was like, well, because my standard for, validated is extremely high. And, I would want hundreds of thousands of data points on each thing before publishing on it.
Right.
And I think we're still a little wild west out here on, what does validated mean and what does success mean?
Well, and that's where some of the cynicism is coming from of what has been the real impact of digital health. And I think it is because we don't have a body of knowledge yet, and we haven't had enough in enough years yet of doing it. I'm going to kick it to you for your story if you could set it up.
Yeah, so my story, it was a story from June from Stat News, and it was about Facebook, and they're redirecting people who are searching for opioids to a federal crisis helpline. And I was actually surprised at how little play this story got. And I'm not sure if it was because there was a bunch of Amazon stuff happening, and every time they, show some indication of something else in healthcare, people get very excited. But I thought this story was interesting for a couple reasons. One is that, of course, it's reminding you how much Facebook knows about you and your health. And I actually think they know far more than they're letting on, or if they were to do more analysis, they would find a lot more. So if you think about some people are searching on Facebook to basically buy opioids. There's the Instagram filter study that shows if you're depressed. There's probably things about like how you're interacting with people that are showing both your state of mind. And then there's also, if you think about it, there's that evidence that shows that, if your friends are overweight, you're more likely to be overweight. Well, Facebook's going to know if your friends are overweight, at least mostly. Yeah. I mean, they're always, for a while, they were sending me all kinds of plus size ads. And I was like, I'm not sure why you think I'm plus size, but okay, at least you don't know everything about me. So I think it's interesting because I think no one talks about Facebook and health very much. And so I think it's great that they're trying to help. So that's also, they understand that they can identify a problem, they can try and help with it. But I also think that, we're not looking at some of the key causes in the opioid crisis. So, and I think that one of my favorite books, which is Elizabeth Rosenthal's An American Sickness, she really breaks down how did we get to these places. And if you think about the opioid crisis, it's overprescribing, but you can't blame the doctors for overprescribing, because the overprescribing is actually coming from HCAHPS, because there's an HCAHPS score of was your pain managed, and so there's this sort of expectation of pain management. And in particular, we do a lot of work with total joint replacement surgery. And when someone is prescribed opioids after total joint replacement surgery, they're always basically prescribed a large number, because you can only prescribe them in person. And so if you just had your knee replaced and your pain's not managed, you can't get back in. You can't physically get somewhere to pick up a prescription. And so they give you too many, basically, in case there's a problem. And then what happens is, we actually, in doing a focus group with patients, not patients that were our patients, but just people who had joints replaced, we heard about a patient who, she took all of the opioids that were prescribed to her because they were prescribed and the doctor told her to do so. So one of the things that we do is in our software, pre and post surgery, we're checking pain medication usage. So, and if someone's not tapering off fast enough, we can alert the care team. So there's a bunch of things going on here. There's, how did we get to here? How are people being educated about these drugs, and, how to take them, and how quickly to stop them? And, how do you think about really closing this full loop? So it's great that Facebook is, solving this or trying to come up with a solution, but it's almost like it's too late. So how do we think about moving these things up further?
Yeah, the social media aspect of this is interesting, because we know social determinants. We know we can find out more from our search history, social media postings, and those kind of things. Things we read, Reddit histories, and that kind of stuff. Then potentially our medical record can tell us, which is kind of fascinating in and of itself. So that data, if that data was ever unlocked, there's a wealth of outcomes that could be driven from it. I struggle with social media, because I don't know if it's media or a social platform, and if it's one or the other, I think it matters.
Right.
And some of this is, I mean, Zuckerberg will say it's not, but some of this is just the increased scrutiny that's happening with Facebook. So he gets grilled, he comes back. I mean, his response is essentially, look, we get tens of billions of posts every day, and there's just no way for us to review all of them, which, by the way, I don't believe is true.
Yeah.
And second of all, he says, well, it's really self-policing. So everyone's out there, they see an opioid ad from a digital pharmacy that's not legit, somebody will flag it, they'll review it, and they'll take it down. The reality is with machine learning, with AI, they can review all this stuff pretty quickly, give it a score, and say, this is potentially illegal activity. They can escalate that stuff, have a team that looks at those escalated items and moves them off pretty quickly. The question is, should we do that? I mean, who's going to create the filter on those things to say, if it's media, then absolutely, I want a filter. I want them to look at everything that's on there and do it. If it's a social platform, I'm not sure I want them putting together a filter that says, hey, Bill just said this to his group of friends, but we find that offensive, and away it goes. So this is that fine line of who determines what goes out on these platforms, and then who determines how this data can be used. I think we can both agree that illegal activity should not. I mean, if it's on there, they should identify it pretty quickly.
Well, if people are paying for ads, like that's the thing. Like a newspaper is not going to, like thinking back to print, or even online newspaper, they're not going to accept an ad from an illegal pharmacy. Or at least if they do, they're going to figure it out pretty quickly. So going back to your point of, them saying they can't police that, they're taking money from these ads. They can police it.
Yeah, you would think they want to. Actually, I think the thing to highlight here is, they're the first ones to voluntarily do anything. Twitter
Yeah.
hasn't done
Yep.
anything.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Reddit, Google, Yahoo,
Yep.
Bing. So we can either come down hard on Facebook or not come down hard on Facebook. The reality is, at least they're stepping up and saying, "Hey,
Yes.
for this portion, we're gonna do our part."
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I was saying I was surprised that that story got so little play, because it is a positive story. It is, hey, we know people are doing this and we're going to try and get them help, as opposed to just ignoring it or profiting.
How much of an impact? I know this is hard to gauge, but I mean, Facebook, I think has less and less of an impact on my kids. Clearly, they've told me that. But it does have an outsized impact on our community. How much of an impact them self-policing and taking these opioid ads off their platform, how much of an impact do you think that'll have? I mean, as you noted, the with total joint replacement and overprescribing, that's just one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But this is a social aspect. Will this have a significant impact on it?
I have no idea, honestly. I think that's the nice thing is they'll know if people click through on those. And I think, certainly if anybody's on one of those hotlines, but asking where they heard about it, like, it's definitely trackable. But going back to the point of, like, this is only a small piece of the puzzle. The other pieces of the puzzle are, starting upstream, and also that, apparently most people get, like, most opioid abuse comes from someone else's prescription. So it's not that buying off prescription to begin with. It's somebody had a prescription hanging around and somebody, found it. So
I think the good news on this is we're mobilized at the JPM conference this year. I mean, just about everybody who got up there. I mean, Geisinger, Dignity. I mean, everybody who got up there had some aspect of story to tell on this. They're laser focused on it, and I think we'll get when it has that kind of mobilization. I think you're going to see progress. So
I would say, our flag that we're always waving is involve the patient in it, and we want to be, upstream. And there's, like, some of our customers are doing things within the hospital to track prescribing and track, possibly overprescribing, or really keep it, do you really need to prescribe this? But then the next piece becomes, when it is prescribed, are you tracking what the patient took? Because pain medication is always prescribed as needed, and no one's ever following up of exactly what you needed. And so we had that in there from the very beginning of trying to close that loop of, let's not just say as needed, let's figure out, did you take it? And how quickly did your pain go away after surgery? Because that's a really great outcome to track, as well as a secondary benefit.
So you're doing self-reporting, I assume.
We are, yeah. Okay. But it's better than, like, what's happening right now, which is no reporting.
Right. No, I agree. So there's no reporting, there's self-reporting, and then obviously PillPack and other things are, digital reporting somehow getting back. Not PillPack, whatever.
Proteus, probably.
Yeah. I'm sorry, PillPack's on the mind because Amazon just, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm going to transition. We introduced a section called Sound Bites. During this section, we typically, just toss out questions, 1 to 3 minute answers. If you want to throw back questions at me, you can. I cannot guarantee an answer, but so let's just jump into it. What's the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur in digital health today?
I think it's probably the gap between some of the incredible work that's going on in, say, like, genomics and AI, and people are getting so excited about potential, and then the reality of EMRs and fax machines. And so it's like, at what point, to use the crossing the chasm, at what point does healthcare make some gigantic leap forward? Because the things, on the one hand, some of the things that are going to be possible or even possible today are pretty incredible. On the other hand, we're kind of a foot in both worlds. Like, we're using machine learning, but at the same time, if we can't fit into a clinical workflow and integrate with a 20 to 40-year-old technology that is the system of record, That's really hard. So it's kind of hard to have like both of these things going on at the same time.
Yeah, so the pace of play is hard, and I've been on both sides of this equation now, and with I've had entrepreneurs look at me and go, "I can't believe you're not smart enough to see this," and I'm sitting there going, I'm stepping back and going, "Yeah, but here's what you here's what you don't see," but you,
Right.
I mean, you clearly see it. I mean, it's the fax machines. There's just so many aspects that need to be brought into to be digitized and brought forward. The quality of the data, the number of silos that are available. It's like, I love your technology. I love where it's not you specifically, but any of them. I love where they're going, but I have to figure out a way to plug this in. And until we have those mechanisms, it's very hard. Second question. So what makes a great health system partner for a digital health startup?
Well, you actually just said it. It's that understanding the bigger picture vision and knowing where to plug things in. Because we're not coming in saying we have to be the only system. And in fact, we're not the system of record, but we have a very important part to play in helping patients. So wherever we come in and they see the vision of where they need to get to, even if it's not to get there today, and they can see that today we may deploy like this specifically for these scenarios, but in the future we're going to be part of a larger ecosystem, a larger overall digital patient experience. That's a great partner. So anyone who comes in and says, yeah, we're going this way, it's inevitable that we're going to do all of our patient interactions digitally, not all of them, but like that there will be a consistent patient digital experience.
Right.
Those are the easiest ones to work with, because they can also look at us and know that they're not going to get backed into a corner because we have an API, we have microservices. You can deploy us white labeled, you can deploy us part of a larger system. And budget's always really helpful.
Yeah, people with a budget and a problem to solve tend to be and a sense of urgency tend to be great partners.
Yep.
So, one of the most important things for a startup is focus. We talked about this a little earlier in terms of, will you go to another country? And the hardest thing for you is, there's opportunity, but, let's stay focused on, what our mission was, which started with your mother. Let's assume you're starting a new startup. I'm not trying to take you in a new direction right now, but let's assume I'm putting you in a different role and you're starting a new startup. What area would you focus on? Right now you're on patient engagement, patient enablement. What is there another area that you're looking at going, that's a great area?
Well, what's really interesting is just in the time that we've been doing this, which on the one hand seems like a long time, and in healthcare is really not a long time at all. We've gone from point solutions to platform solutions. So a point solution for each type of patient or each type of intervention, whether that's like, here's a cardiac rehab solution, here's a total joint solution, to like what we do and what we've always done, which is we can support any type of patient experience. So interestingly, we went from people saying to us, you're trying to do too much, and now they're telling us we're trying to do too little because of this, the ones who see this overall digital patient experience. So they're asking us, how do I attract more patients? How do I, you do a great job of retaining them and recalling them, but how do I find them to begin with? How do I do some basic triage of them when they're just starting to think that they might need care? And so I think what we would do if we were doing today is we'd actually do something even bigger, because our customers are asking us for that something bigger, and the market is ready. I think if I'd come out with like, we're doing all of these things that a patient needs to do outside the clinic, we're going to do them. If I'd done that like 4 years ago, people were just like, you're crazy. I don't understand what this is. So I think we would do a similar thing, but even bigger.
Yeah. And the thing about platforms, because I've been a part of some platforms in the past, and you really have to do one thing well. And then people go, hey, you solved this problem for me. I have this problem. Can you solve that? Can you solve this? And then
that's how we started. That we absolutely had that, and being platform people coming from Microsoft, we saw, if we architect this correctly, there's a lot of repeatability across all of these scenarios.
Yep. And to be honest with you, selling a platform is hard because people just go, I don't know. They just
Yep.
can't get their arms around it. So that's it's interesting that you'd say you'd start differently, but really probably you wouldn't. You'd solve one or two
Yeah.
problems,
If
and
I was, I
you'd
would
have a
say,
platform behind it.
yeah, no, totally. And I think if I was going to only solve one problem today, it might be getting more patients in the door, because that's what health systems are looking for today. Now, that's not the long term. The long term is what is, it would be backed by the whole digital patient experience, multimodal, all of those things.
Yeah, consumerization of healthcare, patient consumers. That's it's an interesting challenge that we're having today. Next question. So, what would you tell someone who's thinking of getting into the digital health entrepreneur game today? So, I actually toyed around with this when I left St. Joe's, and I was going to go to the digital space, and I talked to a bunch of people, and it ranged from "don't do it" to to race for it. It's going to be awesome. So, what would you tell somebody?
Somewhere between those, I would say that you can make a huge difference, but it's going to take a while. One of the things when we worked at Microsoft, oftentimes, you'd have crazy deadlines and you'd have to ship things, and at a certain point, people would say, "Look, we're not saving anyone's life here. We can't say that anymore," and we love that. It's like we can save someone's life. We can prevent a complication or a readmission by catching it early. So I think that with digital health, like, you can have such a big impact, but you're gonna have to be patient, and you also have to be empathetic both to your users, whether those are patients, but also the clinicians. There's a lot of I think Dave Chase said once that he's a Seattle entrepreneur who's beating a drum of changing in healthcare, but he said he wants people who want to disrupt from a place of love, which is, you have to, like, the clinicians are not going away. They're stuck in a system. Don't be disdainful of them. Understand the pain that they're feeling. Like, every time I see these articles about physician burnout from EMRs, I was like, in what other industry is the problem of, like, your technology is making you hate your job? Like, hate your job. I don't, that should not be the case. So that's what I say is, like, go for it, but you gotta be patient. It's gonna take a while.
Disrupt from a place of love. I love that terminology. If you could pull one policy lever.
Oh, wait. I wanted to. Sorry.
Go back.
I have one more thing that I was saving, which is, if you're looking for a new opportunity, I would go back to, again, all these new organizations that are forming.
Yeah.
Because there's something there. They're going to need something. And I think that, one of the challenges of value-based care is that the EMRs are not designed to link outcomes to costs. So I don't know if that's the thing to do, but, like, all these new organizations are going to need some sort of new technology, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and if people didn't know you were from Canada, when you say organization, they'll know you're from Canada. So.
Oh, why? Is there an accent there?
No, organization. It's organization, but
organization. Oh, interesting. I got rid of a lot of my Canadian accent, but there's still a few things that come
up. Process and process are the other word.
I say process now. When I go to Canada, they don't like it. All right.
All right. So I'm putting you in a policy standpoint. So if you can pull one policy lever in healthcare, because, to be honest with you, this disdain for technology within healthcare from the provider standpoint, I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's part to blame on the technology standpoint, but it's really a regulatory and a compliance thing that we have people from afar telling physicians how to practice and how to document and all the things they need to track.
Yeah.
So if there's one policy lever you could pull, what would that be?
Well, mine would be actually around fee for service. I think fee for service needs to be reserved for transactional models like urgent care. So urgent care makes sense. Like, what did you do to this person? I will pay you for those things. But if you want to keep people healthy, fee for service doesn't make sense. You actually want to potentially do less for them. So that's the one that I would like to see. I don't think it needs to go away entirely, because you got to get paid for what you're doing, but it needs to be applied in the right scenarios.
Well, actually, it's interesting because fee for service, I feel like they want to do more because they'll get paid more. And the other, I feel like they want to ration because they get they get paid a fixed
Well,
amount.
that's the problem. Like, it's like there are some situations where you're going to do things and you need to get paid for them, and then there's some things where you actually need to not do things and you need to get paid for not doing things.
Right. Yeah. It's the age-old problem. I'm going to throw out a bonus question here just because I'm curious your thoughts. Big tech players coming in, doing things. Amazon, obviously, they have not only their acquisitions, but the JPM Berkshire thing. You have Microsoft re-engaging in healthcare a couple of years ago and still moving, Google, whatnot. Of the big tech health moves that are going on, who's going to have the biggest impact?
Honestly, I don't know who's going to have the biggest impact. Google's taking a lot of bets. They've got DeepMind, they've got Verily, they've got Onduo, probably a whole lot of other things I'm not thinking about, the baseline study. So if even one of those pays off, it'll have a big impact. I think everyone wants Amazon to have a big impact so that we all get better customer service in healthcare. But I'm thinking back to the beginning, I don't know that I would rule out China. I think we don't know. At least I don't. I'm not paying a lot of attention, but they can do things with a lot less regulatory, and they're very incented because of the population and the fact that the government is, needing to provide care for this population. So I think, it's exciting. I love seeing big tech and consumer-focused organizations taking a swing at this. But I don't know who's going to win. I think hopefully we'll all win.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the case, that the $6 billion going into the market, these big players coming in. And I think that's just indicative of the fact that, it doesn't matter what country you live in, what community you live in. The one thing we all have in common is we want good health. And so that ends up being something we're willing to pay for and something we're willing to invest our minds and time into. So, and it just has a great impact, long-term impact. So I think people love being a part of it. I've loved our conversation. I'm sorry we've almost run out of time here. I
do have a question for you.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, I know I was supposed to be asking you questions as we went along, but I wasn't. And this is a little it actually goes back to your intro, Health Lyrics, what you guys do. Which workloads are you seeing moving to the cloud? And then any particular cloud more than others?
Well, that's an interesting question. To be honest with you, I think Amazon probably has the most mature cloud per se, but I think Microsoft's winning the game. And the reason they're winning the game is because it's just a checkbox on a MSA agreement. So it's, hey, we're going to do Azure, and you just check the box and away you go.
Yeah.
It's just easier. And the other thing is, over the years, health systems and payers providers have hired so many people in that Microsoft stack, so they're comfortable going from SQL to Azure and whatnot. And it just, I've had a CIO look at me and go, I understand the benefits of the Amazon stack. He goes, I can't hire those. In this market, I can't hire those people.
Oh, interesting. I heard someone say that as Amazon's making more moves in healthcare, that's also pushing people towards Microsoft.
Oh, interesting.
Like same way that retailers don't want to be on AWS.
Maybe.
Interesting. But what workloads are, like, what are they doing? Because we see it as we're an application running on AWS, so AWS comes in and they're doing a specific application. But what kind of processing are they?
Yeah. So there's. I'm going to stay in high level here. So it's two things, right? It's cloud infrastructure and it's cloud data models. So cloud infrastructure, you can see it's a lot easier to get to DevOps moving to the cloud than it is to try to build it yourself. And so that's where we're spending a lot of time right now, is saying, look, I hate to talk in these terms, but it's just reality. I mean, right now you're managing your infrastructure with 35 people. When you get to a DevOps environment, that becomes 5 because you're automating and whatnot. Yeah. And that's not to say that those people go away. They could do other things. You could take those 30 people and move them to analytics, because we always need more people doing analytics.
Yeah.
And then cloud data models, again, is just once we consolidate this data, one of the first things you have to do is you have to bring your data at least close to each other, so that as you're creating these platforms that are pulling data from any one of your 800 different silos of data, it's not traveling as far and whatnot.
Right.
And then you can, and quite frankly, at that point, now you've opened up the world of AI machine learning, because
Yep.
you're not going to build that locally. You're going to use
Right.
Amazon's, Google's, Microsoft's. So
Right.
that's the thought.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thanks for giving me that opportunity. I'm gonna skip my. Well, actually, I'll do a quick social media close on this one. So I just read this, and it has a picture of a telephone. It says, if Twitter was around in the olden days, if Twitter wasn't around in the olden days, why is there a hashtag button on landlines? So anyway, that's what my kids would call a dad joke.
That's totally a dad joke.
Yep, there you go. So, hey, thanks for coming on the show. And with an E, is there a good way for people to follow you on social media?
I'm at Ann Wellpepper on Twitter, so that's probably the easiest thing. And I tweet about healthcare, Seattle, dogs, mountains, flowers.
Dogs, mountain. Wow, that's awesome. So, yeah, so you can follow me at the Patient CIO. You can follow writing on the Health Lyrics website. You can follow the show at This Week in HIT, the website thisweekinhealthit.com, and you can catch our videos on the YouTube channel thisweekinhealthit.com/video. It's the easiest way to get there. Please come back every Friday for news, commentary, and information from industry influencers. That's all for now.